It's a beautiful day at Talk Sports. It's me, Bart Talks, with the one, the only, Jurg and Coney, and we're here to break down everything that happened this week. Again, for episode, I believe it's 8. We are in the top 2%, Jurg, of all podcasts that ever happened because, honestly, I'm surprised we made it this far. Quick round of applause for us, bud. Other than that, we're here to break down the Albert Pujols now signing, as we talked about the release last week, and we're going to have a special guest here, and Jurg and him are just going to break down the whole hockey game. I'm going to ask the questions us casual fans got to ask. And other than that, how was your weekend this weekend, Jurg?
I am very happy to be here. I was actually out of NYC this past weekend. I was in PA. I was in the Poconos, to be exact, and had some fun with some of my friends. And now we're back. Made sure to get back here right in time for this amazing episode of the Bunts and Bruises podcast. And like you said, we got some big topics. Even though baseball is limited this week, bro, we got some great topics. We got a big topic to talk about. Like we got a big name. So I'm excited for the show. Let's get things going. Let's get things underway.
Yes, Jurg, let's get right underway. And first, of course, we are here to talk about the one, the only Mr. Albert Pujols and the team he signed with. It was first rumored, but now it is official. He is signing with the LA Dodgers. And Mr. Pujols, what can we say? He's not exactly the everyday man you need, but he's the man right now for the job that the Dodgers need, because not only did they just lose Corey Seager, but they did lose Corey Bellinger in the beginning of the year. He straight up told him, I got a little bit left in the gas tank, Jurg, and he said, I didn't really want to be an everyday first baseman, even with the LA Angels. He saw the writing on the wall. You had Shohei Ohtani taking over the DH spot. You had their new first baseman. His name's escaping me at the moment, but he's a young player who's been actually hitting pretty good, and he's been hitting better than Pujols, who unfortunately has been hitting under 200 this year. But Pujols, he's going to slide right in. He's bringing them another power bat, which is something actually this LA Dodgers lineup needs. They have a lot of contact bats. You slide Max Muncy over the second. And, Corey Seager, he's a great player, but it seems like they figured out the way to fix the job by taking up basically one man's trash is another man's treasure. But to say Mr. Albert Pujols is trash still feels a little odd, Jurg. I'm fully expecting him to actually just... I wouldn't be shocked if him wearing the blue just ignites something and we actually see a rebirth here, Jurg.
Right, and I think he said it. If he didn't say it, it was essentially implied with him going to the Dodgers. He wants to see if he can end his career out with one more championship potentially. And this is a guy who you love to see a veteran who's already won a few times still want it, and not just go to a random team here to potentially finish things out. No, he's going to the team, arguably, even though they've struggled as of late. In recent weeks, the Dodgers are still the premier team in Major League Baseball. They are still the defending champions until otherwise happens in this upcoming playoffs. And honestly, like you said, the injuries to Seager, again, you feel bad for the guy because he's so talented, but has been so injury prone. Bellinger getting hurt to start the season, former National League MVP. Who knows if Pujols just shows up? That could be like a revitalization for him, like like just that spark he needs, and that we're not going to say he anywhere near going to return to the form that we saw in his peak years. But if he just gets that batting average up like 225, 230, hits a couple homers here or there, that's very valuable for this team. And again, a two-time champion who went to the playoffs a bunch of times with the Cardinals, went just one time with the Angels. Like, this is a guy that brings that experience that these guys are young in their champions, but now you bring that veteran there to it's like he's seen so many different types of situations. He can be that guy for that locker room to like try to help keep things steady. Like, look, I've seen this before. I've seen great teams come back. And if they're a great team, they're going to have to make these big comebacks and bounce back from the struggles that they're currently having. So I think underrated. It could be an underrated pickup depending on how he finishes out this season. But I think for the Dodgers, sneaky move for him.
Honestly, Jurg, you said it best. I'm saying the Dodgers could be a spark for him, but realistically, he could be a spark for the Dodgers for them to become back-to-back champs, which hasn't happened in quite some time. So if you bring that veteran leadership into a locker room, and he's actually only, I believe he said he wanted to play past this year, which is a very big possibility. He's actually only 33 home runs away from hitting that big 700 mark. I think that's going to be his main goal right now. I fumbled it last episode saying he was at 3,000. He's way past 3,000 hits, but 700 home runs, that's the new aim for him. And I think he can really hit that. Only a few batters have been able to make that. I believe A-Rod was almost there, but unfortunately the Yankees gave him the boot before he could hit that mark. So for Pujols to just add another notch on the belt for his Hall of Fame career, it's just going to be really something to see. But aside from the Pujols news today, we have some other MLB news, and it's really just injuries left and right. It's actually it's the Bunts and Bruises over here in the MLB. You have Abreu bumping into Hunter Dozier. Both of them are, Hunter Dozier is in the concussion protocol. Jose Abreu ended up on the IL due to an ankle injury. We have the Mets over here placing both Michael Conforto and Jeff McNeil on the IL, which you hate to see as a Mets fan because that is two very big bats, although they have not been batting the best they can this year. Those are your middle of the lineup guys. I'm actually curious what's going to happen. If you're a Mets fan like me, you have that feeling in your gut where here it is, the beginning of the end. So hopefully my Mets can figure a way to turn it around because we still got DeGrom injured. And honestly, our whole season is basically in that man's oblique. So other than that, you also have the Yankees who just placed Giancarlo Stanton on the IL today. You kind of saw it was going to come, but you never know with the Yankees. For some reason, they like pretending someone's healthy even though they're not. And it's very obvious because they haven't played in 4 games. And it's like, right. What's wrong? So other than that, that's basically the league right now. You have Christian Yelich over here in the minor league taking rehab games. Bright news from a Mets fan is Noah Syndergaard. He is scheduled for his first rehab game next Wednesday. So hopefully we can see Thor out there by mid-June. That's going to revitalize that lineup right there if Jacob deGrom is seeing some more extended time. Other than that, that's the entire league. But let's get right to it, Jurg. I'm excited to talk about because we're in the beginning of the MLB season. It's still young. You know, there's not many topics to come up until we hit towards All-Star break, maybe a little after that, closer to trade deadline. But the NHL, we have started. It is here. The Cavalry, they had to play like 8 games for no reason, I believe it was. You told me, Jurg, but they did it. They're still playing somewhere. It's not on TV, but they're playing somewhere. But we got it. We are here for the NHL playoffs, and Jurg, I am so excited to welcome our second guest ever on this show. I was actually on his show on Friday. I'm calling collusion. He is the host of the Shooters Shoot podcast and the creator of the brand new on Fridays at 8 p.m. where I will be a weekly guest, and I'm excited about it. The one, the only, Kenneth Cotterill. How you
Thanks
doing,
for having
Kenneth?
me on, guys. Really appreciate it. The collusion is not there. I'd like to just get that out there in the open right now. But super excited about the new show. We had a good week. Well, some of us did, that being myself at 3-1 this past week. But super excited for the new show. We're going to have a lot of Off the Ball Network guys coming on this coming week as it's going to be week 2 of our season. So really looking forward to talking some NHL with you guys.
Yes, and you know, we got our hockey guru here, Jurg, and we got our American hockey guru, and now we got our Canadian hockey guru. So we're fully international here at the Off the Ball Network, and this is something we're excited to get into. So, guys, let's talk about it. The first game, which I took an L in on Kenneth's show of this young NHL season, was the Bruins versus the Capitals, and the Capitals took over the Bruins 3-2.
I had nothing to do with his betting loss, by the way.
I might have sent a text asking for some advice. It might have leaned me towards the wrong way. I won't say yes. I won't confirm or deny. But, guys, Capitals beat the Bruins 3-2, which was actually completely opposite of what I saw happening. Jurg, break it down for the people.
So, essentially, I think, and Kenneth can concur with this, what we saw early was goaltending for the Capitals showed up in this series a bit earlier than we expected. So, Vitek Vanacek, who was the starter for the game, came out early due to, I think, a lower body injury, if I remember correctly. And veteran, and this wasn't the first time I saw he was on their team this season, but it reminded me he was on the team. Craig Anderson, the former Ottawa Senator goalie, suited up for the Capitals, was ready, came in, and had a pretty solid game for himself. and did just enough. And I can only stress the just enough part, as we're going to go into as we overview every single series. Did just enough in net to help the Caps get that crucial Game 1 win. That really, it kind of looked like Boston had a significant chance to get the victory. Going into the series, the Capitals, while they are the higher seeded team, being the second seed, they were not the hottest team. The Boston Bruins have been scorching hot going into the last month or so. And it may not show in the record, but it shows in the chemistry and the offense. And that has been the case ever since the trade deadline. And while they only may have produced a couple goals in Game 1, this is a team that all 4 lines have the potential to make an impact, especially their top 6. Again, after the trade deadline, the Taylor Hall pickup proved to be immaculate. James, we spoke about it on the show, how we hope that Taylor Hall would do good for the team. He scored 8 goals in a Bruins uniform since he was traded to them. So he's been good. That top 6 has been good. Definitely a shock to see Craig Anderson, of all people, kind of put a stop to the Bruins. But it's also Game 1. These teams need to, as many times as they faced each other, you were speaking about it like notches earlier, James, when it came to the notches in Pujols' career. It's the same in the playoffs. Like, the game just goes up a different level. And it doesn't matter how many times you faced. Game 1 of the playoffs is a blank slate, and the Capitals got that Game 1 win. But I will say this. It wasn't a clean Game 1 win by any stretch of the imagination.
Yep. Go for it.
Go ahead, Kenneth. No, guess first, of course.
So, I mean, these two teams coming into it, they were about as split down the middle as you could get. They split the season series 4-4. So, I mean, coming into this series, you expected it to be close. And, I mean, it's shown it already. They went to overtime in Game 1. The best storyline, of course, being Zdeno Chara going up against his old team that he captained for so many years. So that was a huge one coming into this. I often forget that Chara's still playing given how old he is. But, I mean, Ranger fans had to be pissed to see Tom Wilson get the first goal of the playoffs and just be celebrating. I mean, a lot of people weren't happy about it. But, I mean, he came up big in that moment. But Washington deserved to win this game. Don't get me wrong. When you look at overall, they were the more physical team. They out-hit the Bruins, which is pretty surprising given how physical the Bruins team can be. And then the fact that they had more shots on net. They did lose the battle as far as faceoffs go, but, I mean, Nick Dowd, give him all the credit in the world for getting the OT winner. And they slowed down Boston's big 3. When we're talking about that top line of Pasternak, Marchand, and Bergeron, only 1 point combined in the first game. So if you're Washington, that's right up your alley. This is perfect. We slowed them down. Hall and Krejci, there was so much going into this series about that second line. They were held pointless in the first game. And as we're recording right now, they have a point so far in this game. So it's good to see that, you know, they're starting to make an impact on this series. But Rask played well. He made 32 saves. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what you expect out of a guy like that. Just the fact that Anderson, I was just as shocked as Jurg was to see that he was even playing in this series, let alone that he was still in the NHL. So hats off to him. He came in, he came in clutch with 22 saves and ultimately got the job done for him in the first game.
So you guys mentioned Taylor Hall on the Bruins. My quick question is, Anthony Mantha, who we also mentioned in the previous episode, Jurg, does he have any chance of making a big impact for Washington Capitals here? Because this is actually his first taste of the playoffs for the casual fans such as myself that don't know.
Right, he definitely could. I think he also did pretty solid for the Caps when he was acquired. About 8 or 9 points from the trade deadline on, 4 goals for them. He's one of those guys, not as physical as Tom Wilson, but he's a solid player in terms of height, weight. Like, he's not going to throw the body around like a Tom Wilson would, but he could still be that guy that could cause a few issues for this Bruins team. Like Kenneth said, this Capitals team has size on them. Like, these guys aren't afraid to get physical. And again, like Kenneth said, Boston is typically the kind of team that out-physicals players. That's how if you look at their last playoff series win, each of the last 2 playoffs, both against the Carolina Hurricanes, they just completely out-physicaled the Hurricanes and outmatched them and outmanned them. That they just overpowered them. And this is going to be interesting to see how Boston bounces back, because they can't overpower this Capitals team with Wilson, with Mantha, and even though it doesn't matter if he's a fossil, Zdeno Chara being the tallest player in the league, you're not going to overpower that team. So you got to find a way to beat them. But like Kenneth said, the offense, as of now, getting going just a touch. We'll see how the rest of the series plays out, of course. But if game one's any indication, we're set for a absolute barn burner of like a good 6-7 game series in round one.
Yeah, I mean, Mantha did have a point in that first game, so first taste of playoff success. That's huge for him. I mean, he's going to be probably second, third line guy for this team. So I don't really see him. He's not going to have like 8 points or anything crazy, but if he can just chip in with the few assists that they need or a key goal, I mean, that's why they brought him in, because Washington's incredibly deep. We've already seen tonight TJ Oshie finally gets on the score sheet with Ovi getting the assist there. So, I mean, Washington's a deep team and so is Boston. That's why everyone coming into this thought this was going to be such a great series, because neither team is great defensively. Like, they're good as far as the offensive side of the ball goes, but defensively, I mean, they're both pretty poor. So I think overall they definitely need to step up. Like, guys like McAvoy need to be huge for Boston in this series. Otherwise, we project a 6 or 7 gamer, but it could easily go 4 or 5 if for whatever reason Washington wins this game tonight. You go down 2-0.
Right.
That can be really tough to come back from.
Unfortunately, both teams' defenses weren't bad enough in game one where I needed them to hit that over, Kenneth. But we'll talk about the other side, because this game went into overtime. We'll talk about the other game that happened in the East Division that went into overtime, and that was the Islanders beating the Penguins 4-3, which was another game I thought about betting. But someone said, I ain't going to say who, either way, we'll switch that up. Tell me what, actually, you guys both, to our faithful listeners who listened to the Saturday wrap-up that I actually hosted, both you guys actually said the Islanders you had projected as your first-round knockout. Your team most likely to be a first-round knockout. So what are your thoughts on the Islanders actually topping the Penguins, the number 1 seed in the division, Kenneth?
So I liked Pittsburgh coming into this series. But they're behind the 8 ball now, and a big reason why is Kyle Palmieri. I mean, when these teams met in the playoffs back in 2019, that was a guy that was not on the Islanders, and he came up huge in that game. He had 2 goals, including the OT winner. But, I mean, let's be clear, both of these defenses also have to do a much better job. Like, Sorokin shouldn't be taking 42 shots. Jerry shouldn't be taking 41. There's zero reason, even going to overtime, there's zero reason why a team should ever have 40 shots in a game unless it's just end-to-end, and that's what it felt like in this game. I mean, the Penguins got a goal out of Crosby, but Malkin wasn't playing, so it's tough. Like, when you're missing such a key guy like that, and Jake Gensel nowhere to be found, it felt like at times. I know he had an assist in the game, but felt like he wasn't even out there at times. I mean, the Islanders are a scrappy team, and they're a team that knows how to beat the Penguins. When they met them in 2019, they swept them. So, I mean, this is a team that you have to watch out for. Matthew Barzal didn't even get going in that game either, and he's their best player. He had 45 points in the regular season. So they need to figure it out quickly, because if you're Pittsburgh and you go down 2-0 heading back to the Islanders' home arena, that's going to be incredibly tough for them. But give the Islanders all the credit in the world. They won that game. They got that road victory that you need to get in the playoffs, and now the series is theirs for the taking.
Yeah, and Kenneth, when you talk about how big that game was, especially just getting 4 goals on the Penguins, because the last month or so of the regular season, those that followed my weekly power rankings, especially the last couple weeks as we headed to the end of the season, the Islanders kept dropping and eventually did drop out of my top 10, because, again, it's a weekly thing, because the goal scoring essentially, despite it being played on ice, it felt like a desert came in and the Islanders just couldn't score at all. Like, it was just that bad for them. So ultimately for that team to get those 4 goals was big, especially all those shots on net as well. Like, they had a lot of games where their shots on net just did not feel like quality. It was a completely different story against the Penguins and that team, which, aside from Chris Letang, who's offensively, like, he's outstanding. The rest of that team's defense, while at times, like, certain defenders haven't looked as bad this season as you probably would have thought, they're still not great, right? And you need your defense to step up. I think when we could almost look at the Capitals-Bruins game similar way, where the Bruins defensive core needs to step up, because we know how good Charlie McAvoy is. We know he could be a really good player. I think if you he had 30 points in the regular season. If you project that out to an 82 game regular season, he would have had like 45 at least, or something around those lines. So ultimately, it's a similar case here. You have the one really great defenseman, and then the rest of the team needs to step up. And I think the big thing here is that Varlamov didn't play game one. That was Sorokin, like Kenneth said. And Sorokin's been good. Don't get me wrong. He has been outstanding for the Islanders this season. But Semyon Varlamov has been their number one goalie. And the fact that he was out and you couldn't get that final goal to get past the rookie, Sorokin, like, I'm not going to say red alert in Pittsburgh, but there has to be some concerns there because, like you detailed, yes, Sid scored, but it didn't feel like the kind of game where he could have taken it over. Jake Gensel was solid during the regular season, and he's always been solid with Crosby, but he can't be getting shut down like that. And Palmieri, at the end of the day, stepped up. He actually tailed off in terms of what he was doing for the team in the regular season, and it was starting to look like that his acquisition was going to be like a questionable one, but then immediately it all gets forgotten when he puts up those 2 goals in game one. So that's how quickly a narrative can change in hockey and sports in general, which is part of the beauty of it. But yeah, I think the Islanders definitely shocked us all. It was definitely their offense that did it. Now the question is, can they continue to get that offense? Because while Tristan Jarry did have a bad game and he let up some soft shots going, at the same time, he's also played well for stretches of the season. So if Jarry could just clean it up a little bit, if the Penguins team can just clean it up, they have a chance. Because while regular season to me is very touch and go, they did beat the Islanders 6 times, if I'm not mistaken. Like that has to an extent, I stress to an extent, that has to mean something. You should have the confidence. And the Penguins just did not play like a confident team in that game one. It just didn't feel like it to me.
A wise man once told me the playoffs is a whole new season, Jurg. So, they might have beat them in the regular season, but it's a whole different animal.
I wonder who that was.
It's some guru I know. He's Albanian. I'll meet you. I'll introduce you guys someday. So you said it's not red alert yet in Pittsburgh. What does Pittsburgh have to do in game 2 to make sure they aren't down 2-0 and it becomes red alert?
I think Kenneth outlined it defensively. You got to clean things up. Both goalies just faced a ton of shots. And you could honestly say the same thing for the Islanders. But because the Penguins have been the more offensively inclined team recently, they're the team that you would look at to likely get more shots on net throughout the game. But it's just the defense that needs to do so. And you have to try to limit this Islanders team where there are some good offensive players on this team, but they're a defensive first hockey club. Like, look back at their playoff run last season. While they'll have that game where they do go get the 4 goals, they could very much easily follow it up with only putting up 1 or 2 in the next game. But if they can force you to make mistakes, if they could force you to be sloppy with the puck, they could beat you 2-0. So I think the Pens offense can carry over, but that defense, if you don't play well on both ends of the ice or on one end of the ice, it actually can affect the other, believe it or not. So it's because all things about the flow of the game, players, etc. So I think for the Penguins, defense needs to be first and foremost. Try to help Jarry a little bit. Try to step up to the Islanders' level of play. Because if you don't, like Kenneth said, you're going to fall down 2-0 in this series. And to lose your first 2 at home when you're the home team, that almost feels like the death blow.
And I think the doubt would then start to creep into their mind because the fact that they got swept, you then go down 2-0 and then you're heading back to their building, could very easily happen again, and it's got to be something that's on your mind. One guy that has to step up for Pittsburgh, and it was someone that they acquired, was Jeff Carter. Jeff Carter in that game was a -2. They didn't acquire him to come in and just get beat. And he's a veteran guy. He knows what it takes to get it done in the playoffs. And he's got to prove it now because this was that big acquisition that I think people felt like, okay, this is what Pittsburgh needs to maybe take them over the top in the division, really compete with Boston and Washington, the Islanders. But you got to be better than that. You can't be -2. He's got to step up in game 2 and show why they brought him in.
So we had 2 high-scoring games that went into overtime. But now on the other side, on the West Division, we had Kenneth's best hit of the weekend, I believe it was. And that was the Minnesota Wild, sadly, another overtime game, beating my Golden Knights, only a sad 1-0. What's your breakdown of this game, and how did you know that the Wild was just going to beat the Golden Knights going into it, Kevin? Because you were not even fairly, you were way above the moon confident. You said, this is my lock of the week. So what had you give that gut feeling?
Well, I want to give a shout out to a guest on my show when we did our NHL playoff preview, Patrick Schur. He's a good buddy of mine. And he highlighted the fact that all throughout the regular season, it seemed like Minnesota had Vegas number. And when we recorded, we didn't know that was what the matchup was going to be. But he said Vegas does not want to see Minnesota. It just feels like that's a team that matches up really well against them. And I mean, they proved it in game one. And don't get me wrong, Vegas came out and dominated to start the game. They outshot them 19-5 in the first period. But Cam Talbot thought that he was Carey Price for one night and just decided that he was going to go off. And I mean, 42 safe shutout. That is massive. And that's not the Cam Talbot that we saw in Edmonton, for sure. And so, I mean, overall, shout out to Joel Eriksson-Ek for getting the OT winner. But Minnesota, they just started plugging away after that. And, you know, they seemed down. You know, when you're getting outshot that poorly in the first period, a team can slump. But they didn't, and they fought back and ultimately end up scoring that game winner. But, I mean, Vegas, I still picked them to win this series. It just felt like a game one of this is the wake-up call for Vegas that they have to figure it out now. Like, because if they don't, and then you go back to Minnesota, you could just miss out on winning the President's Trophy, and then you're going to be sent home early. So, I mean, Vegas has to get more out of Mark Stone, Pat Chiaretti, Carlson. These are all guys that have got it done in the playoffs before. They now have to prove it. They got to have a big game against Talbot, shake him a little bit, because if you come in and only win like 1-0, that doesn't give you any more confidence. Yes, you're all tied up at that point, but you got to get to this guy. You got to have bodies in front of the net, screen him, start scoring from the slot, and, you know, put 3 or 4 past him, because the last thing you need is to let him go up 2-0, head back to his building, all the confidence in the world, and they just can't have that happen if you're Vegas.
Yeah, and to Kenneth's point, James, like the Vegas Golden Knights not being able to step up, eerily similar to what happened in their playoff exit in the 2020 bubble to the Dallas Stars, where this team that looked so great, so dominant, even though their series against Vancouver ultimately went to 7, you could see in that game 7, while it was only, I think, 2-0 at the end of the day, you slowly start to see what eventually led to them losing to Dallas, which was the goal scoring going away. And this team was dominant throughout the season. They were consistently, I think they may have been the number 1 team in my power rankings throughout the season the most times of anyone else. So we know Vegas is talented. Kenneth's already mentioned a few of the great names. And from, you mentioned where you could get offense from. You can get offense from the blue line on this team with the likes of Alex Pietrangelo and Shea Theodore. Like, there's just talent on this team overall, right? So what you need to do is, as you simply said, like, you need to get goals past Talbot. And if it's not Talbot and it's actually their rookie goalie, Kakkonen, that's in net, you just have to do something to get to Minnesota, because they, like Kenneth said, they have the confidence to go at Vegas. The regular season, while it's a slippery slope, what you can gain from the regular season is confidence to go at a team. And Minnesota, of, I think, all the 3/4s in every division, I think they may have the most, well, aside from Tampa Bay, they may have the most confidence to go up against the 1 and 2 teams in their division. And not only think we can compete with these teams, we could beat these teams in the 7-game series. And it all stems from confidence. And like, again, Kenneth mentioned, Cam Talbot absolutely stood on his head, looking like Carey Price, Patrick Waugh, whoever you want to say. Like, he was absolutely phenomenal. Something we haven't seen. Actually, his first season in Edmonton, he was very good for that team. And then it eventually, he fell after that, ultimately becoming a Minnesota Wild after a few years, and now being a part of a great 1-2 punch in net, which you got to give him a lot of credit. And the scary thing here for Vegas is the fact that Minnesota, they themselves have shown some offensive potency this season. And it's all, not all because, but they're the rookie sensation who's probably going to end up winning the Calder Trophy in the NHL, which is the Rookie of the Year award for the casual listeners. It's Kirill Kaprizov, and he's amazing. He shattered the Minnesota Wild rookie goal record this season. He's proven himself that he's going to be a dynamic offensive player for years to come. And like you mentioned it, Kenneth, in terms of the other series where guys aren't getting things going yet, just imagine when Kaprizov gets things going. Like, if Vegas can't get something on offense, get some pucks past Talbot, and then Kaprizov has like a 2-goal game, which he's had a few, especially in the last month of the season, it could be I think the most disappointing playoff exit for Vegas in their short history, because you can't, like you mentioned, you can't go from the President's Trophy winner potentially on the final day of the regular season to a first-round exit and potentially in 4 or 5 games. You just cannot allow that to happen. So you got to clean things up if you're Vegas. just get pucks on the net, get bodies in front of Talbot, bother him, bother this team. Like, you talk about experience. This Vegas team has experience all throughout the lineup. So there shouldn't be an excuse. And just real quick, shout out to Marc-Andre Fleury. Like, that man deserved the win. Like, he got absolutely betrayed. He just got betrayed in that first one.
Speaking of him, actually, that start for game one was his 15th straight postseason start. I believe that's somewhere up in the rankings where he might have the longest streak. There actually was a little bit of goalie controversy going in, but now there's not with Robin Lehner and Fleury. Is that something that could be an issue going deeper into this series if Fleury doesn't seem to happen to, keep it up, even though it's hard to say when he, had 39 saves. It was just really the one. Other than that, though, is there something where if he, let's say, lets a couple go, that could be something that gets brought up?
I mean, I think they'll have the discussion with it. You're definitely not having it after game one because that loss isn't on him. He's got to be looking around the locker room like, guys, I mean, I'm doing everything that I can. I didn't get scored on until overtime. So, I'm doing something right here. And I think also Fleury's playoff experience. He's played in so many big games over his career that I think he's deserved the number one spot, and I think he'll have it. I mean, but things change quickly in the NHL. You give up 3 goals on 10 shots and suddenly Lehner's in there for the rest of the series. That's just the way that the NHL works. So I think it's his to lose. I don't see that happening for him. I think he's going to keep the job, but I mean, you got to get Vegas scoring some goals. Otherwise, maybe they make the change to fire up the locker room. I don't know. They got to do something.
Yeah. They just need to do something. And I would really feel bad for Fleury if they make that change, and it's not because of him, because like you said, you can not have any kind of conversation about pulling Fleury or starting Lehner. And all due respect, Robin Lehner has been great for Vegas ever since they acquired him, but Fleury this season has just been really good, and you cannot in any way, shape, or form pin game one on him. So ultimately, Vegas, their problem is nowhere near in net. Like, goaltending has been the most lockdown position they've had in their franchise's existence up to this point. You got to fix everything else up front. Needs to do their work, and if they can't figure that out, again, it's not on Fleury. Like you said, James, 15 consecutive starts to open like different playoff years. Like that's just absolutely phenomenal. Like, for a guy like that, who a lot of people don't bring up his name. He's up there in the all-time win list. Like, and he has a couple Stanley Cups, albeit 2 as a backup technically, but he, at any moment in those last 2 runs for the Pens, he could have stepped in. And who's to say, like, you can't say Marc-Andre Fleury wouldn't have played well in those runs, because he's proven he can be the guy on a cup winning team. So ultimately, this is a guy who's been absolutely phenomenal for him. Again, he may have been a backup, but 5 Stanley Cup appearances in his career. 5. You don't sit a guy like that just off of 1 bad game. Even if he does, like, you don't sit a guy like that. You give him a little bit of leeway.
Well, just to inform our fans, for people who are watching, the Capitals have scored. It is tied at the end of the first period, 2-2. Let's see what happens. But to talk about another game happening tonight, we have, sticking in the West Division, the Avalanche playing the Blues. Jurg, what's some things you're expecting from this game that the fans should keep their eyes open for? Or what's a way you could see the Avalanche maybe giving this up to the Blues?
I think what we saw happen between Vegas and Minnesota, if Jordan Binnington comes out and absolutely just stands on his head, a la what he did back in 2019, St. Louis will have a chance to win the series, without a doubt. Now, can he do that 4 out of 7 times against the President's Trophy winning team? And while there's been a bit of a stigma surrounding the President's Trophy in recent years, especially after what happened at Tampa Bay back in 2019, but ultimately, like, you give the respect to what Colorado did. And the last, like, you're talking about teams that are hot. I don't know if there's a hotter team going into the playoffs than Colorado. And I'm not just talking about a good week. I'm not just talking about 2. The last, like, month and a half, they have been the premier team in the NHL. Like, at one point there, like, a record over a 25-game stretch for them was, like, what, 21-1-3 or something like that. They were just absolutely going this season. And what they did, they sat a couple of their key pieces in the final regular season game against the Kings, and they still put up like 5-6 goals on them to ultimately clinch the President's Trophy. So this Colorado team is overwhelming in terms of what their offensive potential is. Nate McKinnon is one of the best players in the game. Mikko Rantanen is a great winger. They've actually shown at points this season they can have depth goal scoring, and I think that's what is going to carry them far and could win them a series against the Blues early on. It's depth goal scoring for them, getting some of these guys who maybe like here and there they flow in the regular season, but a Jonas Donskoy, a Brendan Saad, who's a 2-time Stanley Cup champion on this team, Nichushkin, Comfort, Jones, like whoever you can get it from, just get that depth goal scoring against St. Louis. Because again, Jordan Binnington, Kenneth, we've seen him do it before for a team that won the cup. So you can't, just because you're about give or take 20 points ahead of them in the regular season, this St. Louis team can wrap off a couple of good wins because we spoke about Minnesota before. St. Louis has played Minnesota very well this season. So there's no such thing. You cannot downplay what a team can do in the playoffs, especially in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Because if you downplay what a team can do, next thing you know, they're going to go up on you in the series, and the complexion just changes in the blink of an eye.
I think what's so interesting about this first round of the playoffs this year in particular is about half of the series, you look at it on paper and it's like, well, one team is clearly better, except they have that goalie where if he has the right series, he could potentially win it for them. This is one of those series where if you look at St. Louis, there's no David Perron for game one. That is a massive loss for St. Louis. They need him back and healthy moving forward. So, I mean, if you're looking at St. Louis or Colorado in game one, I should say, you have to win game one, because if Perron comes back after they've picked up a win on you, once again, we're talking about momentum here where that could be huge for them. When we're looking at Colorado, though, they are stacked across the board. Grubauer had the second most wins in the NHL this year, which is something that, Colorado's goaltending over the last number of years, it's been there at times, but then it's also been shaky. Grubauer has played well the entire season, so that's huge for them. You've got McKinnon, Rantanen, Landeskog, just to name a few of their stars as far as forwards go. And then you've got Cale Makar on the blue line, which is huge for them. So this is a situation where you know that you have the edge pretty much across the board. Grubauer and Binnington, this year you'd give the edge to Grubauer, but once again, Jordan Binnington in 2019 was an absolute difference maker. He might as well have taken the Stanley Cup home for himself because of the way that he played in 2019. And so, St. Louis is going to need some guys to step up. Ryan O'Reilly, you need Hoffman to step up, Shen to step up, Justin Falk to step up. These are some veteran guys that they can win you a series because they've done it before. But to say that I think St. Louis is going to win this series, I think it's going to be Colorado. I think they're the deepest team in the NHL this year. It's just, can Binnington steal you that game that you need to give your guys that little bit of a boost? And then you potentially could upset them in maybe a 6 or 7 game series.
Well, Colorado Avalanche is one natural disaster who ended up being the number 1 seed. So now we'll move on to the next natural disaster that's the number 1 seed, who happens to be playing also actually right as we speak, and that's the Hurricanes against the Panthers. Right now the game's at 0-0. The first period is still going. First quarter. Sorry, guys. Oh, I lied. The Predators scored. Never mind. I just updated. Predators are up 1-0, 7:20 in the period. What can a Hurricane do, guys, to get back right now?
I think when it comes to this series, funny enough that you mentioned that Nashville just scored, because the one guy I wanted to highlight was Philip Forsberg, and he's the one who scored that goal for Nashville. But, I mean, Carolina, they won the season series, first division title in over a decade. Nashville, though, they're a team where early on people thought, well, they're missing the playoffs. And then they went on a 23-12-2 run to finish the regular season as the 4 seed. So this is definitely not out of the question for Nashville. Now, I mean, Saros has to play really well for Nashville because there is a lot of star power on Carolina. They're much like Colorado in that sense. But having Forsberg back is huge for Nashville. They were only a +2 in goal differential in the regular season. When you look at some of these other teams, a team like Colorado was something like +60. So, I mean, massive gap as far as scoring goes between teams like that. But, Saros has to play a lot like Talbot did for Minnesota. Carolina, they've got Aho, they've got Trocheck, they've got Hamilton, Svechnikov, Niederreiter, like very deep team. Now, the question for Carolina is, so they're going with Nedeljkovic tonight, but is he going to be the starter for the playoffs? He's basically playing for his life tonight, because if you lose to Nashville, when you've got Reimer and Mrazek behind you, it's going to be tough. He's not in a Fleury situation. He doesn't have that deep playoff experience where he could have a rough start and they still maybe go ahead with him. That's not going to be the case. So they definitely need him to play well tonight. Carolina, I picked to win this series in 5 games, so I think that this is one that they should win comfortably. Just Saros is a lot in the Binnington situation or the Talbot one. Can they play well enough to extend the series?
Yeah, I'm with Kenneth in terms of what my prediction was. I have Hurricanes in 5 ultimately, because it's just the offensive depth they have compared to Nashville. Nashville's top point getter in the regular season ended up being Roman Josi, one of their blue liners, with 33 points. I think 33 points would be like the 5th or 6th best point total on Carolina. That's how good the Hurricanes have been offensively this season in a division with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Florida Panthers where you have to step up. James, I feel like there's a game update. What's up?
Yeah, there is a game update, actually. He just scored right now. It is 1-1.
Oh, the Hurricanes scored. Look at that.
Yes,
well, there we go.
Tuvo actually just scored, as you were mentioning. I can't say that last name, man. I'm not even going to try.
Teravainen.
Teravainen.
There you go. There was way too many accent marks. I knew it was a dub from the start.
Leave it to your hockey guys, James. Leave it to your hockey guys.
But yeah, continue on with your point, Jurg.
He was actually, funny enough, he was going to be one of the guys I was going to mention for Carolina. So the depth on this team, you have Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov, who are absolutely phenomenal for this team. Vincent Trocheck has been just amazing ever since he got to Carolina. I think looking back, even though we knew he'd be a good player for them, I think an underrated pickup when you consider he was second on the team in points this season on a team with this much offensive talent. Speaking of Teravainen, he only played, I think, in like 21 games-ish, give or take, but he had 15 points. So if you project, if he had played the whole season, he would have been close to the 50-point mark for this team. So he's great. And this team, they're not just all finesse. They have their captain, Jordan Staal, is going to, throw the body a little bit, play very good defense. He's going to be that leader for them when he's out on the ice. And then this blue line overall, I would argue, even though here and there they've been just a bit banged up, the Hurricanes, in terms of just solid defensemen, have arguably the deepest blue line in the NHL. Like, you look at from their top pair to their, like, you could argue their bottom pair defensemen could be the second line pairing on a few teams around the league. So that's how good they are. So ultimately, we do believe the Hurricanes will pull both this game and this series out. But like Kenneth said, it's all down to, can this Predators defensive core and UC Saros lock up the Hurricanes offense. In the last 23 games of the regular season, Saros' save percentage was a .945. So in hockey terms, for, again, casual fans, that's a 94.5 save percentage. So of every 100 shots he was facing, he was stopping 94.5. So essentially 94.95, give or take, whichever one you want to go with. That is absolutely absurd numbers for a guy to have. And like Kenneth mentioned, Saros, even though Nedeljkovic on the Hurricanes, he doesn't have a resume in the playoffs, and neither does Saros to an extent. With how good Saros has been over a stretch of time, if Saros has the bad game, he has the leeway to get that second start. The Hurricanes, you need to nail your goaltending decision, and not so much for this series. It's for the second round and beyond, because whoever you're going to face, whether it be Florida or the Lightning, you have to nail the goalie matchup there, because you're going up against either Bobrovsky, who played better in year 2 for the Panthers, or Vasilevsky, who Kenneth mentioned earlier how good Grubauer was. Vasilevsky, you could say, was one of the few goalies that actually was better than Grubauer throughout the regular season. So if you're the Hurricanes, like, what this series is, this is the series to get everything set for round 2, because round 2, that's the heavyweight fight. That is the, especially if it's Tampa Bay, that's going to be the series that decides ultimately who could end up winning the Stanley Cup, because both these teams are Stanley Cup talented. The Hurricanes were also this close to the President's Trophy. Losing the last 2 games of the regular season actually cost them a chance at that. So maybe is it a good thing because of the President's Trophy curse? Who knows? But ultimately, this is a team we know is talented, we know is good. They're going to go through the motions in game 1, but it's weird. You have to think long-term if you're Carolina, but you also can't overlook the Predators. Like, you need to think long-term in terms of preparing your game plan and preparing your team, but you cannot overlook the defense that Nashville has played, because, like Kenneth mentioned, they have been the hottest team in the second half, where I I didn't say it on the show because we didn't have the show at that point, but they were dead in the water during the regular season. They were like dead to right. They were top bottom 4 in the league, bottom 4, bottom 5, very similar to what St. Louis was a couple years ago when they won the cup. So maybe they've been watching, maybe they had a practice fight that we just didn't hear about, and that's what propelled them ever since. But yeah, ultimately we can all agree Carolina has taken the series.
You said Saros had like a 95% save rate. I got like a 95% chance I'm butchering a name here, guys. But since we're talking about Hurricanes, let's talk about the Battle of the Panhandle. And that's the Tampa Bay Lightning versus the Florida Panthers. Tampa Bay won 5-4 yesterday. And you, Jurg, you constantly say you see them repeating again and just taking the whole cup this year. What's something Panthers could do to honestly try and win this game too and build up some momentum?
Not allow Braden Point to score 2 goals in the final half of the third period. Here's the thing that I think people have forgotten the entire time. Kucherov was hurt the whole year for Tampa Bay. This is not, he is an MVP caliber player, but he's not just that. He was literally the MVP a few years ago. That is no over exaggeration to say that his return to that lineup drastically changed things, because he also, if I'm not mistaken, he had 3 points overall in that game. Just the offensive destruction that team can do to you, man. Just listen to the depth that they have in Tampa Bay. You have the stars, of course, like we mentioned, in Kucherov and Stamkos, but then you have Braden Point, who is a star going on superstar in his own right, especially with how he's played in the playoffs going back to last season. Andre Palat, Yanni Gourde, Alex Killorn, Cirelli, Goudreau. This team is just so deep. It's so, the blue line too, by the way. Hedman may be the Norris Trophy winner. At the end of the day, if you're talking about well-rounded in forward core, blue line, goalie, Tampa is probably the team. And if you're Florida, doesn't that just suck? You the best season in franchise history, you got to go up against these guys. It just sucks. But in all seriousness, what does Florida have to do? We know they can come back and we know they can score, but you can't rely on comebacks against Tampa Bay every single game. That blue line of theirs has been a question throughout the season, but especially after Aaron Ekblad went down. That just raised more questions. They need to step up on the defensive side of things here. They need to bother Tampa Bay more. They can't just let Point, Kucherov, guys like that get right at Bobrovsky or get in their position every time. Because if they do, last season, I think, 5 or 6 games, Tampa Bay scored at least 4 goals or more. And they had a 7-goal game at 1 or 2 points in the playoffs. They can actually threaten 10 goals on a given night if they're really feeling that hot. So if you're Florida, you need to avoid that happening. You need to lock down that team to the best you can, because again, you got an MVP there. It's hard to shut them down, but it's all defense. You're not going to, through 7 games, this is the key here, through 7 games, you're not going to outscore the Tampa Bay Lightning. It's not going to happen. 1 game you could, but not through all 7. So that's what you need to do if you're Florida. The focus needs to be, how can we limit this team the best we can? Like we mentioned before with the Capitals and Bruins, how can we force them to play our style of game for this series?
Yeah, I mean, that game 1 was one of the games of the year. You had 5 lead changes. It went from 1-0 Tampa to 2-1 Florida to 3-2 Tampa to 4-3 Florida to 5-4 Tampa. An absolute roller coaster of a game 1. Now, I mean, Tampa got major production from their big guns. When you've got Kucherov with 3 points, you've got Braden Point scoring the tying and winning goal. I mean, if you're Florida and you're the coach, you break that clipboard in half and say, Jesus Christ, guys, this was the one thing that we couldn't do, was allow to get these guys going, because Kucherov, as you said, was hurt, especially late in the year. So to let him just get on a roll like that, that's definitely not something that you want to have happen in this series. Both goalies played fairly well. They saw a lot of shots each, 40-39. It was a lot like that Pittsburgh and Islanders game in that sense. But Florida got out to the start that they wanted. They were the more physical team, which is what you have to be with Tampa when you've got so many speedy guys that can just go in and rip a goal top Cheds. You definitely have to slow them down. And so Florida playing the physical style that they did is the key to beating a team like Tampa. But Tampa kind of weathered the storm. They knew that it was going to be coming, especially with it being game 1. And then they outshot them 30-21 the final 2 periods. So they showed their championship experience by doing that. Now heading into game 2, can Florida respond? Because yes, you're going to be heading back to your building, But Tampa, can win games on the road. So you would love to steal game 2, give yourself that opportunity to go home, potentially put the series to 3-1 and give yourself that opportunity to upset here. But they have to do something right in game 2 because, as you said, giving up those 2 late goals to Braden Point, that's just a mental lapse. You can't let that happen in a series like this, especially when you're playing the defending Cup champs. So Florida, I think they can extend this series for a little while longer. It's not going to be a 4-gamer by any means, but they got to win game 2 to give themselves a chance to actually win the series.
Before we move on to the North Division, I actually want to get your opinion on something, Kenneth. I'm seeing a lot of articles and I'm hearing a lot of people complaining actually about the way the Tampa Bay Lightning use. Jurgen actually explained this during our trade deadline episode. The way how they manipulated the salary cap essentially, and basically Kucherov had no implications on their salary cap during the regular season, and now that he's back for game 1, he's good to go. It basically he's good, and somehow I'm not sure how it works. Jurg, you can explain again later to the fans how it works. But what's your opinion on this whole Tampa Bay bending the rules, quote unquote?
I mean, they're playing within the rules of the NHL, I guess. I mean, it's unfortunate to see it play out that way, but I mean, the NHL wouldn't let them get away with it if it was illegal. So are they skirting the system? Yes, but those are the rules that are in place. If you're the league, you should probably sit down after this season and maybe look at this and say, is this something that we want to roll with moving forward? But I mean, it's within the rules of the game as they are right now. So I'm okay with it.
Yeah, to your point real quick, James, harken back to our trade deadline episode, the long-term injury reserve in the NHL, where essentially you put a player there, the cap hit comes off of the books for the team, and there is a injured player pool that essentially, I'm going to make it real simple. However much a player counted towards the cap space, you get that back, whatever the remainder of the season is in terms of what you get. So again, complicated, and I think a lot of fans learned about that the first time this season, especially because of Tampa. But it's like Kenneth said, it's the rules. It's how they are. And let's not forget, these rules are collectively bargained. So if you have an issue with it, send a letter to the ownership of your team, because the owners have to agree to this, man. So you can't complain about it when it's written in there. Like Kenneth said, I would honestly think, because the NHL, you're about to enter your TV deals with ESPN and TNT. This isn't a big issue by any stretch compared to what any league could face, but this could be something that they have to review going forward. A lot of things they have to review, but this could be one of those things where maybe they can't bend the rules that easily in terms of it. There's got to be some way where it's not the full cap hit that comes off the books, or make sure you test the player's health early, because Kucherov's been skating for a while now. And so that led a lot of people to believe he probably could have played in the regular season, but they just chose to sat him the whole time, which, I mean, again, current rules, hey, more power to the team. They're allowed to do that. But at the end of the day, they didn't commit any breakage in the rules, but what they did could end up changing the rules, which if you're Tampa Bay, hey, man, if you win the cup again, who cares if they change the rules? You got your first cup. Mm-hmm. You could get a second one. Hey, more power to him. More power to him. It's like Belichick in the NFL. He's been playing with that league for 2 decades. Why not let a team, have some fun while they can? I'm for it. I don't care. If it was my team.
As long as there's no trash cans banging on the benches, then I'm completely fine with whatever's happening in the NHL.
So what you guys are essentially telling me is just it's a lot of Florida fans complaining about this new salary cap rule.
It's a lot of fans whose team may not win the cup within the next 3 years. that's who it is.
It's basically people who can't take advantage of said rule.
Yep.
But the Calgary Flames are playing their 30th game, I think, or whatever game they got to make up due to COVID restrictions. I think we're hoping, fingers crossed, we're going to see them play. I believe it's Thursday, game 1.
We don't care about them. They didn't make the playoffs. We don't care about them.
I'm sorry, not the Calgary Flames, but when they're done playing, we're going to see the North Division play game 1 of whoever ends up playing. I believe it is not the Canadiens Maple Leafs. They're playing Thursday. It's going to be the Winnipeg Jets and the Edmonton Oilers. I didn't have to look up those cities. I knew those names, boys. Either way, tell us what the fans to expect for this game one for the Jets and the Oilers, Jurg.
So funny enough, and we actually, when you hosted the weekend wrap-up show a couple weeks ago for Off the Ball Network, we brought up both the Jets and the Oilers in the North Division as a whole on that show. And we, ironically enough, and I think we kind of said this was going to be the case, Kenneth, where round one, it's going to be Oilers and Jets, and it's going to be Maple Leafs Canadiens. And you have, for both series, the tale of the higher seed being the offensively talented team with the superstar forwards that are just next level, versus the lower seeded teams who there's some solid offensive players, but it's the goaltending that if those guys get hot could make the difference. So it's going to be Connor Hellebuyck on the Winnipeg Jets trying to do whatever he can to keep Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl from taking over games. Mm-hmm. And that is easily a task, easier said than done. Connor McDavid just had one of the best seasons in recent NHL history in terms of points per game. I said it last week, since the 99-2000 season, I think he has the highest points per game clip since that year. And again, guys on that list include his own teammate Draisaitl, Kucherov, Crosby, Mario Lemieux as well from way back. So like, this dude's just on another level. And I think he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I'm a Chicago Blackhawk fan. We had no business beating the Edmonton Oilers last season, man. We just did not. Like, the memes were funny and all that. There was some good fun for us on Blackhawks social media. But we did not deserve to win that series just based off of talent. I'm not downplaying what my team did on the ice. I'm just saying, just from a talent perspective, the Oilers should have ran away with that series because you have literally 2 MVP players on one team. So I think in game one, you're going to see how are the Winnipeg Jets going to create a game plan to limit what McDavid and Draisaitl could do on a game-by-game basis. Because we've seen it a number of times. When McDavid and Draisaitl is not creating the offense, the team struggles. So if you can potentially get that 1 or 2 games where they go cold and Hellebuyck could step up for you in the other 1 or 2, you could actually see Winnipeg take the series from Edmonton in 7 games probably if you get that scenario. But I definitely could see the Oilers are going to try to focus in on, while Hellebuyck has been good overall this season, he struggled against Toronto and Edmonton. Like, these superstar forwards just know how to get it by him. So I think we're going to see a battle of 2 conflicting play styles. It's just the pure offense on one side and some goaltending excellence on the other. And it's just going to, who's going to break that deadlock, right? Is it going to be the goalie standing on his head, or is it going to be the offensive stars flexing their muscles? And if game one, I'll say this, the North Division, they got some entertaining series ahead because Edmonton and Winnipeg, man, that's going to be a good one.
I know that we just talked about the fact that, the playoffs is a different series, but if we're talking about how the regular season ended between these two teams, over the last 3 games, Edmonton outscored Winnipeg 12-2. So they beat the brakes off of them. Now, the question is, do we see the Winnipeg team that we saw throughout April and May, or are we going to see the Jets team that we saw in January and February? Because if we get the January-February Jets team, we're looking at a 6 or 7 game series that the Jets could potentially win. If we see what they were down the stretch, Edmonton will probably roll them in 4 games. So I like what Jurg pointed out of, look, Hellebuyck needs to step up in a couple games because when you've got Draisaitl and McDavid, you're not going to hold them off the score sheet every single game. It's like the NBA. You want to try and have LeBron struggle 1 game or 2 games in a 7-game series. You need that to happen for Draisaitl and McDavid. If you can do that, especially early in the series, and get that little bit of doubt creep into their minds, Winnipeg goes up the first game, maybe they're up 2-1, and then McDavid and Draisaitl have to step up. That's the ideal situation for Winnipeg. But I mean, Edmonton's goaltending, I know Smith had a good year and Koskinen as well, but they're not proven in the playoffs. So by no stretch of the imagination is Edmonton unbeatable in this series, which for whatever reason I've been reading a lot, like Edmonton's just going to roll over Winnipeg.
Right.
But I just don't see that as the case because Hellebuyck, yes, did he have a poor year? By his standards, yes. But it was still an average goaltending year for 50% of the league. And we know that he can step up to be that Vezina candidate that he was a couple years ago. And they've got star power. Scheifele led the team in scoring. They've got Connor Wheeler. Ehlers, I believe, is back. So if you have these guys playing well, You win a game 3-2. McDavid and Draisaitl maybe only have a point each, which is slowing them down by their standards. That could be huge for Winnipeg. So I'm not writing off Winnipeg altogether in this series. I mean, Winnipeg only beat Edmonton twice in 9 games, but it's a completely different animal in the playoffs. And there's a little bit of Edmonton might have some doubts after that Chicago series last year because they were heavily favored to beat Chicago last year, and then they didn't get it done. So I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination Winnipeg is out of it. If I was a betting man, I would pick Edmonton to win the series. But could I see them potentially stealing a game 7 off of them and sending them home early? Absolutely.
It's the creator of the Shooters betting corner over here. I got to assume you're a betting man, Kenneth. But we're going to bring it down to the last game, and I don't know what better person to ask about the Montreal Canadiens than Off the Ball Network's very own Canadians. So, Kenneth, the series of the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, who do you got winning this series and why?
If you're Montreal, pray. That's all I'll say. Because across the board, outside of goaltending, everything says Toronto should win this series. They've got more star power. They've got veteran leadership in Spezza and Thornton now, guys that are hungry for a cup. They've got solid defensemen now, which is something that we couldn't say for Toronto for many years. And it's not just Riley. It's guys like Muzzin who are playing for them now. I mean, this is a much better defensive team than we've seen many years. And a lot of people talked about how weak the North Division was this year. But Toronto's still loaded. I mean, they had Austin Matthews, who led the league in scoring. You had Marner, who was up there in points. You've still got Nylander. You've got Tavares. Like, this is a loaded hockey team. When you look at Montreal, it's Carey Price and then a lot of, like, cast-offs, honestly. When you look at guys like Tyler Toffoli, a guy that his former team gave up on. You look at Nick Suzuki, young guy, pretty unproven in the NHL up to this point. He had a good year this year, but we got to see him in the playoffs. Thomas Tatar, I'm a Red Wings fan. I know what Thomas Tatar does, and it's pretty average. And then you've got Jonathan Drouin, guys like that. Most of those guys would be on Toronto's third line. Yeah. That's what's so scary about this series. But Toronto's goaltending, you know, they have Freddie Anderson, but it looks like Jack Campbell's going to be starting game 1. That's a shaky situation there. So once again, if Carey of not a couple of years ago, more like 2014 Carey Price. I mean, if you get that Carey Price for the series, you could extend it a few games. But if Carey plays like he did the rest of the year, I don't see any reason why they wouldn't win in 4 or 5 games, except for the fact that it's an original 6 matchup and the rivalry is there. So are Montreal players just going to roll over? Montreal doesn't let that happen. They're the more storied franchise in the NHL. So I think they'll put up a fight, but at least on paper, this is about as David and Goliath as it gets in the NHL this year.
Yeah, of all the 1 versus 4 matchups in round 1, this is easily the one where it's the biggest discrepancy. And I think it all comes down to Toronto not having the best goalie situation possible. If Frederik Andersen had been healthier in the regular season and he had played better in the final stretch, then I think everyone would probably be saying Toronto in 4 in this one. And probably even joking Toronto in 3, you don't even need that 4th win for them. Like, that's how overwhelming this Maple Leafs team is. Overall for Toronto, this series it's about exercising some demons where they've been knocked out of the first round. How many years in a row now it feels like? Typically comes against the Boston Bruins, so very good for them where if Boston does advance past the first 2 rounds, they don't have to meet them until potentially the Final 4 or even the Stanley Cup Finals, which would be highly entertaining if it was Bruins Maple Leafs. But ultimately, like Kenneth said, like, you want this to be a competitive series because it's an original 6 matchup. Like, this is one of those series where the league is going to push the storied franchise history between these 2 clubs. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Toronto's taking this one. They have, like Kenneth said, they have the guy who led the league in goal scoring. You have the vets. You have a solid blue line. If Campbell can just play relatively well and Toronto can just fire it past Carey Price, and if Carey Price potentially, because he's had some injury issues in the second half of the year, if Jake Allen is starting, like, all due respect to Jake Allen, who's a veteran, like, that just makes the job easier for Toronto. So it's all about exercising the demons, get past Montreal here and get to the second round. But again, Montreal, like you mentioned, a couple guys, Kenneth, who need to step up. Petrie, at one point, a lot of people were really high on him this season. Not to say he disappointed by any stretch of the imagination. He's their top defenseman, but he's going to have to lead the way. The young guys on this team, Juin, Suzuki, Jesperi Kotkaniemi, like those guys need to perform at a high level and match up to this team. And at the end of the day, you're asking the top three names that I just said, they're all 24 below. I think Juin is 24, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 25. Like you're asking three guys 24 and below to go up against three superstars and one star, because Nylander, I call him a star. The other three are superstars. Like you're asking those young guys to go up against those superstars. Like Kenneth said it best. Like you just got to pray if you're Montreal. Like you need to pray that just something like divine intervention, like Carey Price returns to that 2014 form. By the way, if he does return to that form, they may go on a massive run.
That would be
Carey
fun
Price
playoffs.
that Carey Price. Oh my God, he was he was the best goalie in the game by far. Like that year he won the MVP. People legitimately believed Montreal was going to win the cup that year just because of him. If only they had a good team that didn't get destroyed by the Rangers. But ultimately, like that's how good he was. And if he can even show a sign of that, like they upset Pittsburgh last year in the playoffs, in the play-in to get in, and they gave Philly all they could. Now this is a completely different level, but Montreal potentially they could make this interesting. But all signs point towards Toronto. Off to the second round they go.
And is Toronto going to want to, let's say, I mean, no, let's not say, you guys said it like 20 times, that they're most likely going to sweep them. Is that something, though, that motivates Toronto more? Do they want to sweep them due to the fact that they started this whole playoff late, that they're going to start playing on Thursday and not like Saturday and Sunday like the rest of the league was? Is this something that may catch up on them down the road, guys?
I think they need the sweep just from a rest perspective. It's just so tough to see a sweep when you have the storied franchises that you do here. Like everything points to a sweep, but then you also have Toronto with their playoff demons of like, will they sweep or do they drop game one and then suddenly Leafs Nation is in an absolute panic and they're all thinking, oh my God, is it going to happen again? Like, I know my dad's a Leafs fan. 1967, the last time the Maple Leafs won the Stanley Cup. So those are deep wounds that the Leafs fans have. But yeah, I mean, they want to get these series done as quickly as possible. Edmonton or Toronto or Winnipeg, depending who comes out of that series, I guess. They want to be done in 4 or 5 and then probably done in 4 or 5 because that's realistically the only way they're going to catch up to these other teams, because some teams will be in game 3 already when the puck drops for their series. So they need some of these series to extend. You know, you look at like the Tampa, Florida one, maybe not 4 or 5. You want it to go to 6 or 7. So it just gets dragged out a little bit. You want to see Boston and Washington go 7. Like they need these other teams to have it stretched out. And I meant to touch on it earlier. The fact the NHL is going ahead with all of these pointless regular season games, it's infuriating. It's absolutely infuriating that they're letting draft lottery odds affect the playoffs of the NHL. Like, I get it. Like, if you want to air Vancouver and Calgary for the people that live in Vancouver and Calgary, put it on locally. Just do that. Yeah. But is it really affecting these playoff teams? Like, why was Toronto playing the other night? There's zero reason why they should. They clinched the first overall. They know who they're playing. We know who's in the playoffs for there. So I think it's ridiculous that they even have to do those games. And I'm not even a fan of any of the Canadian teams, and I can see how unfair that is to them. So I don't know. I think the NHL screwed up there. I think they should have just went ahead with the playoffs. You know what? If it affects the draft lottery odds, if you got to figure out some way to figure out where they would end up points wise, then do that. Like, but the fact that they're going to stall their playoffs over having to watch Calgary versus Vancouver for the 9th time, like, give me a break.
Yeah, I'm all for him. Like, Toronto's going to want to go for the kill early just to make up for lost time. But yeah, again, back-to-back weeks where I got to criticize the NHL. I'm not happy about it, but I am impartial. I will say and do what I must say and do. And they dropped the ball on that one. There was no, like, Toronto played, like, what Kenneth said, like 2 days before the playoffs started. They're already the first seed. What's the reason to play that game? And here's the thing: they faced Winnipeg. Winnipeg had the 3rd seed. Like, what was the point of the 2 of them playing? Could you imagine if Matthews had sprained his wrist again, or Hellebuyck had sprained his ankle? Like, you just potentially lost the competitive series if Hellebuyck gets hurt that one. It's ridiculous. So that NHL, like, come on, man. Like, make common sense common again. Like, we need to get that trending. Can we make common sense common again? Because, like, there's just something about it the last few weeks in the NHL. It's not that common. And after the start to the season, it was going well, aside from a few COVID cases. Dallas, I'm looking at you. Like, aside from a few things here and there, the regular season started off pretty good. The middle was nice. The deals with ESPN and TNT has given us hockey fans hope for the game to grow at this stage. And then you just have to drop the ball time after time the last few weeks. It hurts, man. It hurts.
Well, unfortunately, Jurg, it hurts me more to do this. That's about it for this week. We went through every single game. We gave you every single analysis. Kenneth, thank you for coming, man. We appreciate it. I'm going to re-listen to this episode and try to take as many notes as I can until the next time we have you on. Hopefully next time we have you on, we can talk more about the bunts and get a little deeper into baseball. But, we'll let that go a little deeper. Kenneth, the floor is yours, man. Tell the people where they can see you at.
Definitely. You can follow me on all social platforms at shooters_pod. We do live shows tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. Episodes drop on all podcasting platforms Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. And the new betting show, Shooters Betting Corner, through my betting account at shooters_bets. It's an incredibly fun look at competitive gambling. Gamble responsibly, obviously. But it's a fun way of just getting some guys together on a Friday night, talking some games that they like heading into the weekend. We saw everything from UFC to EPL to MLB, NHL, NBA. We had it all on this last episode, and hopefully we see that again this week, especially with things like the soccer season coming to an end. So thanks for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. You guys are some of the best at Off the Ball Network.
Hey, we appreciate you, Kenneth. We appreciate you coming on, man.
And Jurg, as always, tell the people where they catch us.
Oh, of course. You can catch us at Bunts and Bruises on Twitter. We're trying to grow the Twitter, so we have that.
Follow.
Yes, absolutely. Follow it. Like, review, follow, whatever it is on Spotify, Anchor, Google Play, I think, James, is the other
Google
one?
Podcasts. Yes, we're
Google
on
Podcasts,
Google
yes.
Podcasts.
Again, James is putting in the work. He's doing all the behind-the-scenes stuff. Apple doesn't want us to succeed.
They just don't. I don't understand it. I guess they found out I pay for Spotify and they're just holding it against me. I don't know, man. I'm trying, though, guys. I'm trying.
It's okay, James. It's okay. At the end of the day, if they don't want us to succeed, we'll still going to succeed. Because like Kenneth said, the three of us overall are some of the best, and you can find our work at Off the Ball Network, offtheballnetwork.com, where we always stream our shows on the Twitter page, Facebook page, trying to grow the Instagram page as well, so you could go follow it. You could go follow James at Bars Talks for him. He is the Don of baseball. James, you undersold yourself at the beginning for your own intro. Don't do that to yourself. You are the Don of baseball, and never let the people forget it. And you can find me at JurgK40 on Instagram and Twitter, where on both of them, I predominantly give my sports stuff. Instagram is the only time you'll see a picture of my face on social, because it's never going to happen on Twitter. Except maybe a meme or two could be coming on the show page on Twitter, because we had a good one last week. We had an interesting show last week.
I forgot.
So make sure, again, follow us on there. Follow Kenneth for him being just amazing overall, an amazing, gracious host. The two of us being on his shows within the last week, and the stuff he's done for Off the Ball Network. And again, just this is the network to be at, guys. You want to follow all the stuff we do, because at the end of the day, we always talk about it in the infamous Off the Ball Network group chat. It's OTBN to the moon, boys.
Just don't let this distract you from the fact that James finished 4th this week in the Shooters Betting Corner. But the one pick that he did get right, my Lakers over Indiana. He hit the spread, so shout out to him for that one. He had more faith in that one than I did.
I'm not in last. That's all I know. If you want to make your bets, please the opposite of what I'm going so far.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this week's episode of Bunts and Bruises comes to an end. Thank you all, and good night.